Today's shout out goes to Carey Driver. Thank you, Carey. Bruvac the Grandiloquent versus Maelstrom Wanderer. We are keeping that because I like having Traumatize in hand. That is a one-shot kill for our opponent if we can stick our Commander. And obviously we can get down the persistent Petitioners as well. And of course it is a Soul Ring from the Maelstrom Wanderer to start things off with. And then swing. Another persistent Petitioners for us. As you've no doubt already guessed at this point, this is a Petitioners deck because Bruvac is an advisor, so it can be tapped down with the persistent Petitioners. I think it's 4 of them we need. Yeah, tap down 4 of them to have a target player mill 12. They will mill 24, roughly a quarter of their deck if we have our Bruvac in play. But unfortunately they are ramping well ahead of us. Still missing blue mana. They're going at us with the hasty 3/3, which we are not going to block. We get into another land, which takes us one step closer to Traumatize. Let's see here. Whenever we draw a card, target opponent mills 2. If 2 non-land cards share a colour, you repeat the process. Yeah, let's just go in for our Bruvac here, because maybe we'll get into Ancient Tomb or a Mana Crypt or a Soul Ring, something like that, and then we can actually just one-shot our opponent with a Traumatize next turn. Really don't care about our opponent's life total, so we won't bother swinging him. The 3/3 comes back in at us, as you would expect. And we're just hoping to not see any blue mana from our opponent at this point. They're only a couple of mana away from their commander. Yeah, they didn't play a land at all, that's good. So now I think we just try and mill our opponent for 24. We'll go in for the persistent Petitioners. And then go in for another one. Oh, actually, I didn't realise. I thought Bruvac was a 1/3 as well. It's actually a 1/4, so we could have blocked there. But it is Wither, so probably a good idea not to anyway. We'll mill our opponent at the end of the turn. It's only Eldrazi that we want to worry about, really. We do have counter effects in the deck that counter triggered abilities. Quite a few of them, actually, so we don't need to worry about Eldrazi as much as we would. Might be that Maelstrom Wanderer has Eldrazi in the deck. Then again, they're not likely to cascade into Eldrazi, so maybe not. Okay, Dragon Broodmother, they're going to be piling in the damage to us if we're not careful. So let's just take a hit for 3 again. And then at the end of the turn, we are going to activate the persistent Petitioners, target our opponent and tap down. Our creatures. Don't need to worry about summoning sickness on that ability because it doesn't have a tap arrow. It just says tap for untapped advisors you control. The good thing about mill is that you get to look at your opponent's deck for anyone who's interested. A dragon coming out from the Dragon Broodmother. We can actually just kill them off with a Traumatize here, because luckily our opponent didn't get off to quite fast enough a start. So let's just Traumatize them. This puts half of their library in the bin and the other half comes from the Bruvac itself. So we'll see if they've got any kind of shuffle effect. They've got a Vigor. That only shuffles the Vigor into the library though, so they're going to draw into the Vigor next turn and yeah, I don't think they can take us out in time. But they're the types of effects that you want to pay attention to. Can our opponent do anything to us here? We know of one of the cards that's in their hands, but we'll just block with everything here, I imagine. So I don't think they can get everything through to us. Let's just scroll up a little bit so you can carry on looking at the list if you want to. Cascading twice will do nothing with an empty library. Unfortunately, they were waiting on an island for a couple of turns. But all of their stuff does have haste now. And they've got 6 damage worth of flyers, which isn't enough to do anything to us. So in comes our opponent with everything. They've got 16 points of damage on us currently. we'll just block like that. We get into Talent of the Telepath, which I just cast for the fun of it, so let's just get back round to our opponent, let them draw into the empty library. They have very gracefully played it out. And there we are. So, showing just how powerful the Traumatize is with our Bruvac. All we need is Bruvac in play. We cast Traumatize and we win the game as long as our opponent can't shuffle their graveyard into the library. If they can, then we need to draw the game out even longer and try and get ourselves into a counterspell that counters triggered abilities. If they've got lots of Eldrazi and lots of shuffle effects, then yeah, we're just even further away from getting a win off on them. But cards like Tripbind is exactly what we want to get into to counter that type of ability. And then we've got things like Snapcaster Mage and Mission Briefing to get the Traumatize off again. Failing that, we can just rely on the Persistent Petitioners. So hopefully you all enjoyed this deck. This was a quick one, so we'll see if we can get another one going. Bruvac the Grandiloquent versus Tinybones Trinket Thief. I've just been trying to play this in multiplayer, Tinybones, and yeah, can't really get very far with it, unfortunately. We are going to keep that in the hope that we'll get into some ramp or at least some lands. If we get into another one, we can go Solemn Simulacrum. I'd very much like to keep hold of the Tripbind, although I don't think we need to worry about shuffle effects in the graveyard with a black commander. Yeah, we'll probably be alright, so let's go for the blue source and pass over to our opponent. I expected a turn 1 play for our opponent there, some targeted discard of some kind, but maybe they've got removal. We'll go for Bruvac, and then we're likely going in for Solemn next turn, try and get as much mana into play as possible. Our opponent gets into their Tinybones. They do have Cabal Stronghold now, so if they can get a bunch of basics into play, that will become relevant as the game progresses. Do we want some Simulacrum or the 2 Persistent Petitioners? I think I want the Persistent Petitioners, actually, because if we get into another one next turn, we'll be able to start milling our opponent straight away. So let's just go for those. And then if we don't get into another one next turn, we can debate holding up Counter Magic or going for Solemn. I think it's 32 Persistent Petitioners we have in this deck. And Chrome Mox from our opponent puts them up to 4 mana. And they put Liliana, the Last Hope, underneath that. Then went for Dark Confident. And then a Miasmic Mummy. When it enters the battlefield, each player discards a card. We just get rid of Didn't Say Please here, I think. And then fingers crossed. Yep, there we are. There's the Persistent Petitioners. Unfortunately, can't hold up the Tripbind thanks to not getting into a land. Maybe we should have gone for some Simulacrum, but we've got Persistent Petitioners online now. We will have to do this roughly 4 times. So it's a case of trying to outrace our opponent now, really. We can do it at the end of our opponent's turn because we don't care about Summoning Sickness. But our opponent doesn't care about their life total either. So Dark Confident ought to do them some use. Alright, that is discard a card to add black on a 5 mana creature. So they did take 5 from the Dark Confident. Going for Mind Rot. Target player discards 2 cards. Let's get rid of Tripbind and the Solemn. And then we can maybe counter something else that's worthwhile with Disallow. No point in our opponent swinging in because we've got high toughness creatures here. They are going to go in for a card draw with the Tinybones, lose a life because we have had to discard a card this turn. Let's go for the Persistent Petitioners. They'll mill 24 cards instead of 12. And like I said in the last game, you can actually start looking at your opponent's library if you want to steal the deck list here. I'd be intrigued to compare this one to my multiplayer version. I might have to start running Tinybones in 1v1 instead of multiplayer. Alright, there's another means of countering another ability. We'll just pass like that, hold up both Tail's End and Disallow. Revealing a Swamp with the Dark Confident this time, and playing into that straight away. Then going for Liliana, Death's Majesty. I think we are... let's counter a legendary spell with that, because they can reanimate stuff out of the bin, and we're loading their graveyard up with creatures that they could potentially go for with Liliana. Again, not swinging in because they can't, thanks to our high toughness. Let's activate this again, taking them down to 35 cards in the library. Yeah, and that's a shame. I feel as though that's going to be the outcome of a lot of games. We take them down by 24 again, which will put them on roughly 10 cards in the library. We were drawing into Fraying Sanity, so we actually could have cast that last turn, and yeah, we would have had them there. At the beginning of each end step, the enchanted player mills X cards, where X is the number of cards that have been put into their graveyard this turn. So we would have had them there. We untap, enchant them with Fraying Sanity, mill them for 24. They get milled for 24 again from the Fraying Sanity and draw into an empty library at the end or at the beginning of their next turn. So our opponent scooped when they were about to lose anyway, as it happens. I think that was another quick one, so let's do a 3-game video. Bruvac the Grandiloquent versus Lurrus of the Dream Den. I was interested to see how people build Lurrus in 1v1. We went for a kind of Voltron deck where all the Voltron pieces could be cast out of the graveyard. If we get into a land, that's pretty decent, but are we going to get into a land is the question. No, I'm going to risk it. We've gotten some fast wins off, so let's give our opponent a bit more of a chance than they might otherwise have. Not to say that this isn't a very good Lurrus deck, of course, but we are on the draw, so we've got twice as much chance to draw into a land of some kind. Okay, just another Persistent Petitioners, so we've got one more draw to get into a land and into that Sky Diamond. It might be worth going for Force of Will onto their commander, actually, if they get it down really quickly. Try and slow them down as best we can. Okay, Corpse Knight, so definitely some kind of combo deck that our opponent's going for. Not much point in countering that because they can just recast it out with Lurrus. We'll try and slow them down by countering their commander with the Force of Will. Keeping our fingers crossed for a land, and there we go, so it pays off nicely for us. Going for the Sky Diamond. If we get into another land next turn, we can actually get down a couple of Persistent Petitioners. And there is our opponent's Lurrus of the Dream Den. Let's hope that they don't just scoop to this. We're just really trying to slow our opponent down as best we can. So that will cost them 2 extra to get their Lurrus down again, which is hopefully another 2 turns. Obviously swinging in with the Zombie Knight. And another land for us, which, yeah, that's just really lucky on our part. Let's go for Persistent Petitioners. Go for a couple of those, and we can just play a couple of them next turn as well and start milling them out for 12. After we've got 4 of them out, we'll go in for Bruvac, unless we get some kind of Mana Crypt or Sol Ring, Ancient Tomb. Preferably, we'd get into a land next turn as well, which would be really lucky, and then we could go Bruvac into Persistent Petitioners and start hitting them for 24. At least we can start blocking the Corpse Knight now. They get into another land, and then in for a Tainted Pact. And they're just filling up their hand with a bunch of stuff here. It might be that they just combo out right here. Plenty of Tainted Pact combos you can go for. Alright, so exiling all this stuff, they were going for the Demonic Tutor. They wanted something specific, and it was obviously a tutor in this case. And there we go, we continue to get really lucky with the lands. Might be that they've gone into a board wipe, so let's just attempt to carry on milling them. We have to play into our outs, and our outs in this deck is milling our opponent, so we'll see if they went in for the board wipe. They went for Solemnity. Players can't get counters. Counters can't be put on artifacts, creatures, lands, or enchantments. That can't do anything to us yet, but again, it's probably part of some combo that our opponent's got. Then a Viscera Seer, always good to have a sack outlet in a deck like this. We lose a life from the Corpse Knight, seeing the Viscera Seer enter. They can't swing in with the Corpse Knight because it will die to our blocks. So luckily didn't see a board wipe. We'll mill them for 24. And then it's round to our turn. I'm actually, the lands just keep on coming. Yeah, we'll play the Ancient Tomb. We can mill our opponent for 8 if we need to with this, which doesn't quite get us there, I don't think. We'll keep hold of the Persistent Petitioners just in case there's a board wipe. We'll need 2 more of those. If our opponent wipes the board, we'll need to replay Bruvac and then get a couple more Persistent Petitioners down. Might be useful with a Thrumming Stone. It obviously depends what we draw into. But we need to try and win the game as quickly as possible because we're actually potentially helping out Lurrus here. If they can get down their commander for 5 mana, which they can. Alright, going for Dance of the Dead. And that is Leonin Relic Warder. But yeah, with this being some kind of reanimation deck, we're actually helping our opponent with the mill, so we just have to hope that we don't help them too much. Okay, do they go... Is this some kind of infinite combo? Yeah. Dance of the Dead gets exiled until... Yeah, I think they've got infinite on us here. We can't do anything to them by getting rid of the Corpse Knight. Yeah, so what happens here is the Leonin Relic Warder exiles this. When this gets exiled, the Leonin Relic Warder will go into the bin, which will bring this back into play from exile, and it reanimates this thing, and that just goes infinite with the Corpse Knight. So I don't think there's much of anything we could have done here. If we had a counterspell for triggered abilities, then we could have, yeah, we could have countered one of these things, but our opponent's got us here with an infinite combo, like I said, helping them out a little bit with the mill. But maybe running Putrefy or something like that would help us out in this deck. Not having too much card draw has hurt us here. So the Dance of the Dead comes out, it animates, or reanimates, the Leonin Relic Warder. That comes in and triggers the Corpse Knight. The Relic Warder triggers and exiles the Dance of the Dead. When Dance of the Dead is removed from play by going into exile, the Leonin Relic Warder will go into the bin, triggering the Leonin Relic Warder to bring Dance of the Dead back from exile, and then it enters and has an ETB of bringing back the Leonin Relic Warder, and you just do that forever, and eventually we'll go down to the Corpse Knight triggers. So we'll say good game to our opponent. They gave us a preemptive GG, they don't know what's in our hand, don't do that. But our opponent does have us here, so let's have a look at some more cards that are in their library actually. Just for anyone who's interested. We'll mill them for another 24. So there we are, a bunch more cards left in there, and then we'll go for the Hypnu Rivulae as well. I don't know how you say that. Hypnu Rivulae? Rivulet? No idea, but we'll go for that as well. Mill our opponent for 8, get them down to very few cards in the library. Yeah, getting them down to 3 cards, so you can have a look through the library there if any of you are interested. But that is the game for us, so said good game to our opponent, let's just concede and scoop it up there. So I saw some good stuff from Bruvac there. I think it's a fairly fast commander if you can get some decent mana on the go from rocks and ancient tombs, soul rings, things like that. And I hope that all of you enjoyed it. Nearly had 3 games on our opponents there. Be sure to leave it a thumbs up and a comment if you did enjoy it. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.